So our next presentation is from sociocultural anthropology. And I am talking of Jude Nwachukwu presentation, Christianity and the Double Inside-Out War on the Poor, a Nigerian Anthropological inquiry. He was up here, now is for us to know who he actually is. Jude Nwachukwu, please.
I will save everybody time. I'm not going to stand here for up to 30 minutes, thank God, because the only person who can stand here and speak all these technical theological languages would be somebody who has enough to say. So that gives me some consolation myself that I will not embarrass myself. And so it was not by accident or sheer stroke of forgetfulness that Joseph put me at the last. He did that also when I was here in March on globalization, right? Yes. So that's, I'm not wondering why it is that way, because I know why. Now, the other thing I would like to add as a preamble, which is already the ongoing thing I'm talking about, is Emeka led us into the wood of searching for Christ in world Christianity discourse. Emmanuel took us into the woods with Emeka to look for how people are actively participating in Christ, who is the liturgy itself. That's my own interpretation. Forgive me, both of you, if you are still there, in case my interpretation is a bad one. Then I am joining them. They have simplified my matter, because I must be honest. I came here not to give a lecture, but honestly to have a discussion and throw out my confusion. In order, that's why I came with a notebook. I'm a good student. I came with a notebook and my pen, so that whatever you tell me will help me to clear my confusion as somebody still in the woods searching for what I was brought here for. So I'm joining Emeka and Emmanuel into the woods to do one thing, to find out why and how it is that Christ is present in our Christian life, and Christ, who is the liturgy itself, is also whom we are invited to participate in his life. And yet people are deeply, deeply entrenched in worshiping Christ in different ways, in giving, and they continue to suffer more and more of poverty. So, I do not believe that this was the intention of Christ. Otherwise, how did he give people the word and at the same time looked at them with compassion and found that they were hungry? So he went and also gave them food that everybody ate abundantly and much was left. I do not believe that what is happening today in the circles of the church would be the mind of the Christ whom Emeka took us into the wood to go and find out why Christ is absent from the discussion about what Christianity, and the same Christ whom Emmanuel took us into to go and identify in the liturgy, to be with in the liturgy. So that is why when Joseph insisted I must be here, I agreed. So I decided to come out and throw one of the things that I have been battling with in my head, which is Christianity and the inside-out double war on the poor. So I am going to identify the two wars, and in the second war, if not in the first, the second war actually, there are two wars. So ideally it will be three wars, all on the poor. Let me make the statement of my case here. I'm here to reflect along with you the fact of what I am sure, not just because you are fellow Nigerians, many of you here, but even other people who are not Nigerians and who have not even stepped foot into the shores of Nigeria would also have the same experience through reading, through social media and internet connections today. Poverty. But I'm not looking at poverty in global. I'm looking at poverty specifically in relation to the church, and how the church is a major contributor to how people are poor. So, that's my point. Then as an anthropologist, I would want to apologize that I would not speak the heavy language of theologians. I'm the only one here who is outside the forum. But permit me to join you, as Joe has already given me the privilege. So if I don't speak the language of Lonergan and reading method in theology to be recommended to Emeka, in order that Emeka may read method in theology to find the Christ that he's looking for, forgive me. So I'm going to talk the language of the common people.
Oh, no. He's coming for you now.
Like individual, if you will.
Okay. So, the point I am making here is the anthropologist would not go to Lonergan. They may align with Lonergan along the path. But the anthropologist is interested in what we call social facts. And social facts is where we find people, where they make meaning, where they live in the culture they themselves create, and the culture also co-creates them. So that is where I am meeting the people. The people Emmanuel is inviting us that they are participating in Christ, the liturgy. The people, Emeka was also, I don't know what others gave because I've not been here since Thursday. Emeka was also telling us about. So what I'm saying here is, as an anthropologist, I am meeting people where they are. And meeting them where they are means that, one, I would have to ask them what is going on by being a participant observer. And participant observation would therefore lead me into what I am saying. And I've spoken with a lot of people back home in Nigeria, thanks to communication these days, so I don't need to fly home to do that. In my preliminary inquiries, we know currently that the situation of Nigeria is about the worst ever since so-called independence of Nigeria. We are not yet independent. So, and what is the social fact? What's the situation there? My argument is that religion is lived. A particular religion is lived in a social context where it is situated. I'll give you an example. Rastafarianism is a version of Christianity, but expressed according to what the people are experiencing. So also, Christianity in Nigeria can only be talked about in the context of what is going on, because they are not living Christianity in the air. They are living Christianity in a social context and the situatedness of their life, along with other things about their life. So, in that light, I am therefore identifying as my third move, Christianity, the way it was packaged and transported and imposed on Nigeria as in other parts of Africa. It was not anything far from being an extension that went hand in hand with the colonial agenda. We know that. You are all scholars. If you dispute that, then I will be at the wrong place. I would agree with Tonyin Falola in Christianity and Social Change in Africa, where she argues, as the editor of that heavy volume, that Christianity was and still is an agent of colonization. Things Fall Apart tells the story. Kudip Sunday, a drama I acted when I was in the major seminary, also tells the story. So as an insider, a priest like you, I am also aware of my experiences with people, with bishops, with the lay people in the parish before I came to the US 18 years ago. So, my argument, therefore, is in meeting people where they are, I am also meeting them in the historical context of the Christianity that was given to them, and how they have embraced it, how they have internalized it, and how they are living it out. We just finished up the question now. You started it, I followed it up. Why is it that people are so much involved in church things, yet they are at the fringe and outside? Because of the same mindset. That is a mindset that we inherited, but we have not been able to pull away from that mindset. And until that is done, nothing has happened. Now, further this way. Here are the few things that I earmark the social context of Christianity as expressed in Nigeria since independence. One was the subtle coercive imposition that Christianity is. Christian message is infused into disempowering education. The education that it came with it was not the one that would make me to be free for myself, to think for myself, but I have to think in a colonial mindset. In other words, therefore, Christianity's colonization is that of indigenous knowledge colonization. Christianity and its otherworldly cosmology and worldview, that is even the crux of the matter. Christianity is a worldview in itself, but the way it was brought to us, permit me to say it is a worldview, that does not remove the fact of what Christ taught. After all, was it Alfred Loisy who said, Christ preached the kingdom, and behold, what came was the church. And when the church came, it became an institution, and it is the institution that we are dealing with. The institutionalization of that institution is the problem we have. Maybe I'm in a little we're talking theology now that I promised I wasn't going to talk. So, the otherworldly worldview that Christianity gave us makes people to focus on the promises that cannot be realized now, as if the Christendom of Christ preaching is not a lived reality that people can begin to have now. And that takes us into the socio-political atmosphere of Nigeria since independence, that I already said never happened. And we know that since that time till now, what Nigerians have experienced continually is nothing but daily increasing economic hardship, corresponding biting hunger and poverty, elite corruption and looting. And the only thing that works in Nigeria is corruption. That is the only thing that works. No wonder in his book, Democracy and Development in Africa, Claude Ake, in that 1995 book, wrote over and over again that the problem of Africa is not that development is not, but that development has not yet started. And the reason it never started then and has never started now is that every available resource that could be used to invest to improve people and improve the environment in the name of development never went into that. The elite always took everything away. Look at what is happening in Nigeria now, which is even the climax of it. And we know how we got to this particular point in Nigeria, how the Supreme Court did what it did overnight, and how somebody I would very courageously call a stooge, somebody I would call, because there are facts to that effect, a criminal who has not cleared himself became the president of Nigeria and does not care. That disconnect is what our problem is. And I'm going to connect that to the church, and for you to see that I'm not talking about social facts in isolation, but I'm talking about what Christians are experiencing. And the Muslim counterpart of Nigerians can also speak in the same terms, even though the way everybody is blindfolded by religion is a problem, as if religion in itself is the problem. So I'm going further to talk about youth, high youth and general unemployment, consequent lack of expected development, and dashed hopes for the better. So all these things, therefore, culminated into people holding God responsible for their poverty. That is why we hear about Thai night. Recently, people called me, Father Uwaoma, and I said yes. Are you also following? And this was my own cousin's wife, my senior cousin's wife. There is this man I am following, and she is Anglican, not even Catholic, asking me for approval because, I don't know, they call him Emeka somebody. They call him, he's not a priest, and he says he's not a priest. He's doing something in the web and taking people to the other heaven. And it is now the end thing. She was asking me if I'm part of it. I said, Auntie, I think when I was home last, we quarreled very seriously, so much that I rejected their food. Because each time I came to say hello, your children would tell me you were at the church from morning till night. What are you looking for? And the answer, and in her answer, she represented what everybody else, everybody in the sense of sui generis, she would say, well, God is our hope. Yes, God is our hope is what they are expressing, because they have been completely disappointed by the political landscape in which all of us find ourselves in Nigeria. Insecurity, lack of development, no infrastructure. So in the face of all this, people begin to lose sight of the first part of the war I'm talking about here, the war that is coming from outside the political leaders, part of which I have already talked about. That is the greater part of the war. Then the other part of the war is what the lay people themselves, because they have been blindfolded, are waging against themselves. Because we have been so brainwashed, and we have so brainwashed them that, oh, we have to pray. Therefore, they have lost touch with the powers they have to revolutionize things in the society. How long ago did people go on protest in Nigeria? How many hours did it last? And any time Nigerians go on protest against the things that is holding them down, it does not last even up to 24 hours. They march back home because of the repressive forces they are afraid of. And in that light, people turn to God. Now, in turning to God, they are hoping that God will, as they say, give them the miracle. As if development comes by miracle. I didn't know that America, where I live, came to this point by miracle. And I asked them, what do you think? You don't find Christians in America? And the response is, oh, those Americans who don't go to church. Okay, since you go to church and you believe that God is the one who is going to bring development, why has it not happened yet? So, the focus, therefore, heavily, 5 minutes, the focus heavily is on God, as if God is responsible. And then we are hammering and hammering God. And then that is how I see the second war. Why the second war is coming from the leaders of society, the elite, the second war is coming from the people themselves who have refused to hold accountable those who are holding them down, and therefore holding God accountable. The second part of the second war that is coming from inside is from the elite within the church, the bishops, the priests, the pastors, the preachers. Just a few weeks ago, the pastor of my parish called me. You know that your parish is the mother parish of Uwaoma diocese. He didn't know I had already had an earful. There is 100 million naira launching, and they are expecting me, in his own words. You can appeal to your friends overseas. And he just came back from Australia, where he was for 10 years. He doesn't know how to bring his own friends, but he's waiting for me to bring my own friends to come and contribute money. What is this for? To mark the 100 years of the Catholic Church in my parish, which is the mother parish of Uwaoma diocese, where you were talking about lived when he finally created the cathedral and moved over. Yeah, that's my home parish. Yes. And he said, you know, it's a thing of pride. You are the only person who was baptized there. You did your first Holy Communion there, your confirmation, you served at Mass there. You were a member of the choir, member of the youth, and you were ordained a deacon, you were ordained a priest there. So, we are looking up to you. And I asked him, Father, don't you see there is a huge disconnect between you and the people whom you are expecting to bring 100 million naira in the Nigeria of today? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to build a new church? So, I'm talking of mindset. And this is the man who eats 3 square meals a day, creating a launching trackway for people to bring money. And I told him, you know what? I'm not going to be part of that. And I'm not going to give a dime to that. When I want to give to my parish, I will give to my parish. But to this, I told him, call it off, Father. Oh, the bishop has already decreed it. It's okay. Let the bishop give you the money. And I spoke with a priest living with that bishop last night. Intentionally. How you do? Oh, we just came back from dinner now. Said, what did you eat? He was describing, and he didn't know. Just this past night, I said, did you eat in the afternoon? Yes. In the morning? Yes. Okay. And he said, there was still a lot of food left. So when there was enough food left after everybody ate at the bishop's house, what about those who are being taxed to pay so that the priest will pay 30% after every Sunday into the bishop's account? I will conclude by saying, I don't have a conclusion. Because I'm looking up to you. I told you I came here so that you will enlighten me. Because this is a very troubling matter for me. The only point that I would add is, this is not a thing that is going to end with ease. I don't see the sight of ending it in view. Because the whole thing has become so systemic and deeply entrenched in our minds that the church, that is the carrier, the vessel of Christ's message of liberation, is at the same time the same institution that is contributing immensely towards people's operation. And it is so disconcerting for me. A few years ago when I was home, we attended the Cathedraticum. And it was when the then Jude Okalo, governor of Abia State, was running for his second term. In the same mass where I went to go and renew my vows as a priest. And then for us to contribute hands, lay hands and bless the oil for our sacraments, was the same venue where the bishop campaigned for a second term of the same governor who was owing as at then 22 million naira to workers of the state. And the Jude Okalo governor was there with his entourage. And the Donald Duke of Cross River State was there with his entourage in the same cathedral. And I nearly walked out. I said, what am I here for? And many of the people Jude Okalo was owing were there present, dying in silence. And when he finished that, 2 days after, I was going to about to buy motor parts for my car. Because my car spoiled, so I was going to, I dressed in mufti and joined the public transport. And people were lashing their tongue over that particular thing. How they heard, and those who were present were criticizing this. The next week, we attended priest retreat at a place called St. John's Abokwitem. And this matter came up, I brought it up and said, here are the things I heard from people. People are not happy. Telling us he tied the whole cathedral premises, he gave us land here and there. You are telling people that he was looting the money of the state with which he should have paid people to come and give to the Catholic Church and give to you, my Lord. With due respect, this is not right. Guess what I heard? The next Sunday, after Children's Mass, the bishop's driver brought me a letter with which I was rooted out and thrown away from that parish. So this is the church. And this same person now is the one who endorsed the letter that you may have seen from the CBCN desk condemning partisan participation in politics in Nigeria. And then when that thing came to me from a priest in Germany, my classmate, it came to our Bishop Bigger 1992 platform. I called the priest, I said, please, cut this thing immediately. And after hearing me, I don't know, he said, what happened? I told him my experience about this. So he immediately deleted it, and I took consolation. But that is not a consolation about this. My consolation will come from you when I have talked my point here. Let me hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so at least we have, because Jude raised so many issues. I agree with some, I don't agree with a lot. And
that's why we're here.
Yes, so let's begin with questions. Yes, Simon.
First of all, thank you very much. I love your presentation. It's inspiring and challenging, prophetic as well. I will speak from what I have been working on. For the last 5 years, I've been very engaged in decolonial studies. And I was asking this question, why is Africa poor? And then I realized from my research writing, there are 3 colonialities that usually are in decolonial studies. Coloniality of power, coloniality of being, coloniality of knowledge. Thank you. But there is a coloniality that no one was talking about, or no one had articulated, but I was able to articulate it based on reading Frantz Fanon closely. It's coloniality of imagination.
Mm-hmm. Which of his books, if you don't mind?
Black Skin, White Mask, and also Wretched of the Earth.
Wretched of the
Find that there. And you also see it in the literary works like Anyikwe Ama, The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born. He wrote that book. And then Anyikwe Ama is talking, and then who are these beautiful ones that are not yet born? Are the ones who are able to break the cycle, the toxicity, and the trauma of the imagination. So that's it. What I was articulating, I said that if we want to understand why Africa is poor, you cannot use coloniality of power, coloniality of being, or coloniality of knowledge, because this is not the machine. The machine that is shaping Africa's cyclic poverty is coloniality of imagination. The imagination and colonialism. The power of colonialism is not stealing of your resources. It's the ability to convince you that the person stealing your resources is Jesus, or is God, or is Allah, is the best thing that has happened to you. And for you to become a being that is a colonial being that helps to pack the resources and give to the one who is stealing it. So that said, I am arguing that if you look at this is where the research is now going further, I'm looking at Europe. Christendom was not just, it was a political theology in praxis. The West, political theology did not begin as a post-colonial reality. It is how Christianity, the West, shaped its own society. And Christendom, that it is within that political world that Christianity was brought to Africa. So the agents of Christianity, the agents of colonialism in Africa, they are operating, and they gave Africa a reality but with two heads. Coloniality of imagination, both in the religious and in the secular world. And coloniality of imagination works by erasing the colonized. So in your psyche, you're always erasing yourself in everything you do. Religiously, as you go to church, you're erasing yourself. You think you are finding yourself. Socially, you are erasing yourself. So I think what you are talking about, that's what I raised earlier on, and I'll end with this quickly. Until you find a theoretical framework to deconstruct the nation state in Africa, these whole social teachings of the church will not lead anywhere. To just be like giving $5 a meal to somebody at the street. But the very structure of the state is meant to erase the being of Africanness. And Africa can never be healthy once that state has not been deconstructed. And it is by going to the psyche again. So rituals of, I call it political rituals of exorcism of the African psyche. For us to be able to undo this coloniality. I can talk more about this or share some works with you later on that I have written about this.
Thank you. Thank you. I want me to get yours and talk together. Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm interested about your the nullification, my own words, of the traditional education system and replacing it by a Western system of education. And it comes to your point that where Nkrumah said the colonized mind. So that's where we are. And I come from Eritrea and Ethiopia, where, of course, Eritrea was briefly colonized, but we had a long educational system where the monasteries and the churches transmitted knowledge, scientific knowledge, literary knowledge, and all those things. But when Ethiopia became a modernized country, a Western education was introduced. So Ethiopians claim that we have never been colonized, but in their mind, because of this parallel education to the traditional education, they have been even more colonized because they cannot get out of that mindset of thing. So I appreciate bringing it up, but I would like you to, if you can help us, elaborate a little bit on that.
On what specifically?
In terms of what would have been if we had developed our own African education system away from the imposition of this didactic system of Western education. In this country we call it Afrocentric in a way, but how could you imagine what African way of thinking or philosophy of life would have been away from that imposition.
It will be a little bit thorny at this point that we have already absorbed and fallen to the iron laws of Western education, the language of which I'm speaking now, when we have already gotten to this point. But then the point I am disagreeing with is as if education, and that is the problem, education and literacy would only be seen from that lens of the Western milieu. When I was invited to teach a class at Columbia University on education or literacy, my one point of disagreement, and even in crafting the syllabus for that class, was I had to disagree that literacy is only about reading and writing. Because our great-grandfathers, my grandmother, whom I live with extensively, was literate, but not literate in the sense of ability to read and write. Because the things I got from her by then still blow my mind when I remember them now, in light of the fact that I'm able to read and write, unlike her. So, education and literacy are defined from the lens of the people who brought us what they had. So much that it made us to forget that people were still able to make meaning and interact with their environment in such productive ways and self-providing ways before Western education came.
Thank you.
Yes, Patrick?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for this presentation, Jude.
Thank you.
One thing that struck me was so many parallels that you had spoken about with liberation theology, which is kind of where I focus my more theological studies, coming out of a Latin American milieu. And one of the things I was thinking is that two Latin American theologians, Ignacio Ellacuría and John Sobrino, have kind of emphasized this notion that salvation truly rests not in, some one-off prayer or one-off ritual, but in this continual effort to take the crucified peoples down from the cross. And it strikes me that many of the people in Nigeria, in Africa, are are representative of those crucified people who have been placed on their own crosses of suffering, not through their own choices, but through the choices of colonizers and governments and even priests and bishops. Do you see those same parallels there, maybe, where maybe shifting the discussion away from, a one-off ritual of baptism, but this continual effort to educate towards liberation? I mean, I'm thinking of people like Paulo Freire, even, the pedagogy of the oppressed. Of course, and, kind of his more modern successors of bell hooks in the education paradigm. Are there parallels there that you see, kind of?
Of course, you already laid it out yourself, and I see those parallels more where people embrace religion so much as to even almost validate Karl Marx's notion that religion is the opium of the people, where people go to find hope, even where there is no ground that Christ even promised anybody anything like that would happen. And the landscape of that is what is absent from what would have ordinarily empowered them and given them the light they are looking for. And I am not in any way arguing that suffering would ever die in the human existence, in our existential pathways. That will always, whether it is suffering in the sense of hunger or in the sense of sickness or in the any other sense people suffer, they are all part of life. But what I'm saying is the church, even in the educational system that we embraced, even when the government of Nigeria, for example, took over schools from the missions, and destroyed it and gave it back to church. By then, what multiplied everywhere was the private school system. And the private schools were never made any room for the poor. I was talking with two principals yesterday, discussing this to see what they would say. They told me that it is now 2 weeks into their resumption after they resumed, that they have not even gotten up to half of their students because their parents are not able to pay. And these are Catholic boarding house schools. So the children are still at home. Their parents in Nigeria today are not able to afford the school fees for the children to go back. So even the school system that the church, the Catholic Church and other churches or denominations established in Nigeria after what happened historically is not programmed to accommodate the poor. It is always for the rich. So it's the same thing. And I have many experiences from people from Latin America. When I was in Los Angeles, California, Archdiocese, I always discuss this kind of thing with them. It's the same experience. So I don't know if I addressed your point.
No, that's great. Yeah, thank you.
Let's take a question from Emmanuel, Chinedu, and Agbo. Emmanuel, please, you can ask your question now. Yeah?
Yeah, he should be here.
All right, thank you very much. My question more is to appreciate the presenter. My former lecturer in Seat of Wisdom.
I know you.
In 1990s. Yes, you know the young shall grow.
Yes, you have grown. I met one of you here in March.
Yeah.
Okay, just to appreciate you and also to say that you are still funny and firing like a real scholar. But I would have pinpoint to the issue at stake is to say that your conclusion is here is accurate. I want to believe that your conclusion can still end up by advocating for maybe reorientation in our educational system or our growth system, especially whereby we look onto the white or the Western world as if they will solve all our problems. The problem we can help ourselves. I appreciate how you perhaps try to ensure that you advise people properly, that they can solve them, they can do things for themselves. And it's a good example. Remember, the church diocese, sometime when late Archbishop Ego now built the provincial seminary, which ordinarily nobody would have imagined that a good archdiocese can do that, or a diocese can do that, showing that when people really harness the resources, they can do wonders. They must not wait for the white, maybe the Western world to come to their assistance. That perhaps, yes, we will not reach there today, but at least let's begin to tell people that what they can afford, that is necessary. We must not build all these big, gigantic churches that experience has shown that many years to come, people can even leave that parish and go to another place. And we learn a lesson from what is happening in the Western world, where churches are even being sold down, turned into ballroom, dance club, or what have you. Now let them do what they can afford, what can be maintained, so that many years to come. So that I just agree with you that only make the house, since you want us to tell you that you are right, you are correct in your conclusion by saying that there is need for reorientation in our mind state in the educational system from the anthropological point of view. Final point is once again to tell you that some of those your beautiful writes up in Wisdom something journal. I will not say I will be taking some ideas from there, but just to say that you were right and a congratulations and well done.
Thank you.
And now that a greater scholar has spoken, Emmanuel, I would say that I maybe was being humble enough, even to the point of self-denigration by saying I don't have a conclusion. I wrote up to 4 or 5 points here. A total, complete reorientation in consciousness is needed. A new paradigm shift in education in Nigeria. Priests, pastors, preachers need to render the word in better ways that will make people realize the powers they encapsulate in them. Like, I remember when I was home, I read a book by George Ehusani, The Prophetic Church. And the bishops of Nigeria frowned at that book and told him to ban the book. Yes, to record the books, because he gave what I would call a great pathway to doing what we are calling for and talking about now. The title of the book, that book is called A Prophetic Church. I read it up to 3 times, and I said, so somebody in Nigeria, a priest, could write this. I think by then, he was either at Siwa or working at the Catholic Secretariat, and that cost him a lot. So, those are some of the things that really informed my mind when I was listening back to myself. The church must re-examine itself, and the Christian message, it has a mission to carry on. So those are the things that I had as my conclusion, but decided to keep them aside until I would hear from you. But now Emmanuel, the greater scholar, has told me that that could lead me to somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one more question, anybody?
Before Joe comes.
No. My question will drag us beyond. I will discuss that with you later on.
Sure.
You know where our views differ.
Oh, sure. he doesn't want me ever to put any blame on the colonial history. I know.
No. Oh, he's willing to die. I'm with you on that. We're against him then.
Yes.
Mine is not a question, but I concur with the presentation. A while back, I was listening to Chimamanda Ngozi, giving an experience of troubles Nigerians go through when somebody loses a loved one, and then the parish priest comes up with a list of items that must be made before the funeral rite could be conducted. And then there was a time she challenged it, and when her own mother died, the priest, instead of like carrying out leading the funeral rite and consoling the family, used that moment to attack her. So I think these are things that should be confronted, that bishops, priests are not some small gods to impose their will and also be agents of exploitation among the Christian community.
Good. Chimamanda and her parish priests can also be a little bit of an isolated case. More, we can discuss that more. So it should not be a rush and everyone thinks everybody. Okay. There are nuances there.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So before we end this conference, I have a few comments. But thank you so much. Thank you. Few announcements.